The gun didn't make Zara Kemi let go. She felt the cold metal press against her temple, hard, deliberate, real, and she tightened her arms around the child anyway. The little girl was trembling, so violently it felt like holding a live wire. Her pink dress was twisted, her dark hair wild, her face buried so deep into Zara's chest that Zara could feel the wet heat of her tears soaking to the green apron. "Release her," the masked man said. His voice was flat, professional, the voice of someone who had said that sentence before. Zara didn't release her. She didn't know the child's name. She didn't know the name of the man holding the gun, or the name of the man now stepping out of the black SUV behind her, or the name of the world she had just walked into by crossing one ordinary Chicago sidewalk. She knew one thing. A child was screaming, and Zara Kemi had never once in her life been able to hear that sound and stand still. Then a shadow fell over both of them. Gene Cairo did not run. Men like Gene Cairo did not run toward anything. They arrived, and the situation rearranged itself accordingly. He stepped out of the armored vehicle with the unhurried precision of a man who had calculated the outcome before his foot touched the pavement. His security team moved like water around him, surrounding, neutralizing, sweeping the perimeter in seconds. Zoran was already gone, swallowed by the evening traffic, and the gun was no longer at anyone's temple. What remained was his daughter, and the woman holding her. Gene looked at them, really looked, in the way he looked at things he did not immediately understand. The woman was trembling. Her apron was twisted. One of her earrings was missing, and there was a darkening bruise along her left side where Zoran's weapon had connected. She was not from his world. Everything about her said so. The worn non-slip shoes, the ink stain on her right wrist, the way she was whispering, it's okay, I've got you," into Sora's hair like she was trying to hold the child together through sheer repetition. She hadn't let go, even with the gun at her head, even when every reasonable instinct should have, told her to drop the child and run. She hadn't let go. Chicago does not stop for other people's emergencies. The city moves. Cabs honking, a street vendor packing up his cart a half block away, two teenagers laughing at something on a phone near the corner. The golden 6 o'clock light made everything look warm and ordinary, the way only late autumn light can make dangerous things look like they belong. Zara Kemi had been on her feet since 10 that morning. She worked the floor at Hanol, one of the most expensive Korean fusion restaurants in downtown Chicago, a place where the clientele arrived in cars that cost more than her mother's house in Atlanta and ordered bottles of wine without glancing at the price. She had 3 more tables to close before end of shift. Her lower back had been talking to her since hour 4. She had a voice note half recorded for her mother that she'd been meaning to finish since noon. She had been, in every measurable sense, a woman trying to get to the end of a Tuesday. Table 7's waiting on the Omake second course. Her manager, a sharp-shouldered man named Derek, had said into her earpiece 40 minutes ago, "And someone at the bar wants to speak to the manager about the sake selection. Handle it, Kemi." "On it," Zara had said. She was always on it. She moved through the dining room the way she always moved, efficiently, warmly, with a particular invisibility that excellent service requires. Be present enough to anticipate. Be invisible enough not to intrude. She had spent 3 years learning the precise calibration of that balance, the way you learn to carry a fully loaded tray through a crowded room, through practice, through injury, to the quiet development of a strength that nobody in the room ever thinks to notice. At the corner table, a woman in a cream blazer was telling her companion, "We had them redo the whole kitchen. If it isn't Calicut marble, what's the point?" Her watch alone could have covered Zara's mother's next 4 months of medical bills. Zara refilled her water glass without breaking stride. The delivery was supposed to be simple. A supplier drop at the side entrance. 2 cases of yuzu from a new distributor. Sign the sheet, bring them in, back on the floor in 5 minutes. She pushed through the side door into the early evening. The sidewalk smelled like exhaust and fried food from the cart 2 doors down. The light was the color of something ending, and a child in a pink dress was screaming. The shift had started at 10. Zara knew the exact moment because she had checked her phone right before clocking in. The cracked screen splitting the time display into 2 jagged halves. She had been meaning to fix it for 6 weeks. She kept forgetting to find the money. That was the thing about Zara's life. It wasn't that things were falling apart. It was that everything was held together just tightly enough that there was never a free hand to fix anything extra. Hanul restaurant sat on the ground floor of a glass building in downtown Chicago, the kind of place that had no prices on the lunch menu, because the people who ate there did not need to ask. The dining room smelled of sesame and expensive candles. The tablecloths were changed between every seating. The staff moved quietly, like background music, present but never interrupting. Zara had been doing this for 3 years. She was good at it, better than good. By 11, she had memorized the dietary restrictions of every guest on her section. By noon, she had smoothed over a mix-up in the kitchen before it reached the dining room. By 1, she had talked a nervous first-date couple into relaxing simply by being warm and unhurried with them, even though her feet were already beginning to ache. Between the lunch rush and the afternoon prep, she slipped into the small staff corridor near the kitchen and pressed record on her phone. "Hey, Mama, just checking in. I know you said the clinic moved your Thursday appointment. Make sure you write down the new time. Okay? I'll call tonight." She paused. She could hear the noise of the kitchen behind her, pans and voices, and someone dropping something heavy. "I'm good. Don't worry about me." She ended the recording and sent it before she could add anything else. She did not mention the electric bill. She did not mention that her sister Amara had texted that morning about a gap in her nursing school fees. She did not mention that the number in Zara's bank account, when she had checked it at breakfast, had made her chest feel tight in a way she was used to by now, but had never fully accepted. There was no point in worrying her mother with the math. Zara would figure it out. She always figured it out. Back on the floor, Derek was already looking for her. "Kemi, table 4 needs the tasting menu explained. And someone at 6 is asking for the manager." "I'll handle 6, she said. "Send table 4 to me first." Derek opened his mouth like he might argue, then closed it. He had learned, over time, that arguing with Zara about efficiency was a losing position. She straightened her apron, rolled her shoulders back, and walked out smiling. No one in that dining room saw the tiredness behind it. That was exactly how she needed it. The delivery was supposed to take 5 minutes. 2 cases of yuzu from a new supplier. Sign the sheet, carry them in, get back on the floor. Simple. Zara pushed through the side door at 10 minutes past 6, rolling her shoulders against a familiar ache that settled into her upper back somewhere around hour 5. The evening air hit her first, cool and sharp after the warm, scented interior of the restaurant. The light outside was the deep golden kind that made even concrete look beautiful. Long shadows stretched across the sidewalk. A food cart 2 doors down was releasing smoke that smelled of grilled corn. 2 pigeons argued on a fire escape above the delivery bay. Ordinary. Completely ordinary. Zara looked left for the supplier's van. It wasn't there yet. She exhaled, shifted her weight off her right foot, and pulled out her phone to check the time. That was when she heard it. A child scream. High and desperate and raw. The kind of sound that does not leave room for confusion about what it means. It cut straight through the traffic noise, through the cart vendor's music, through everything. Zara's head snapped right. 20 feet away, half hidden between a parked car and a black tactical vehicle with no plates, a masked man in full dark gear had a small girl by the arm. The girl was in a pink dress. She was twisting, kicking, screaming with everything she had. Her dark hair had come loose, and her face was wet with tears. The people on the sidewalk had stopped. A man in a suit stood frozen with his briefcase at his side. A woman near the crosswalk had her hand over her mouth. Nobody moved. Zara moved. She didn't think about it. The thinking came later, or maybe it never came at all, because there was nothing to think through. There was a child. There was a man dragging her somewhere she did not want to go. That was the entire equation. She dropped her phone and ran. She covered the distance fast, her non-slip shoes slapping the pavement. She hit the space between the car and the vehicle and wrapped both arms around the girl from behind, pulling hard, planting her feet, holding on with everything she had. "Let her go." Zara's voice came out louder than she expected. The masked man turned. His eyes, the only part of his face she could see, were cold and completely unsurprised. He released the girl's arm, and in one smooth motion raised the gun. Zara pulled the child into her chest and turned her body sideways, shielding her. The gun pressed against her temple. Neither of them moved. The girl, trembling, soaking Zara's apron with tears, pressed her face deeper into Zara's chest and grabbed 2 fistfuls of green fabric. Tires screamed at the end of the block. Black SUVs. 4 of them, moving fast. The SUVs stopped hard, doors already opening before the vehicles had fully settled. Men poured out, 6, 8 more, moving with the tight coordination of people who had trained for exactly this. They spread across the sidewalk in seconds, pushing the frozen bystanders back, sweeping the perimeter, weapons drawn but controlled. The masked man was already gone. Zara had not even seen him leave. One moment the gun was at her temple, and then the screech of tires had pulled his attention for a single second, and he had vanished into the evening like smoke. Zara was still standing in the same spot, arms still locked around the girl, heart hitting her ribs, so hard she could feel in her throat. Then the last door opened. He didn't move like his men. They moved with urgency. He moved like urgency was beneath him. He stepped out of the rear vehicle and straightened to his full height, and the golden evening light caught the sharp lines of his face. Strong jaw, clean-shaven, eyes that took in everything without reacting to any of it. His suit was black, fitted close, and his shirt beneath it was equally dark. The red tie was the only color on him, a single deliberate contrast, like a warning written into his clothing. Dark-ink tattoos climbed the side of his neck, disappearing beneath his collar. He scanned the scene in the way that people scan a room, when they already know what they are looking for. His gaze moved past the security team, past the bystanders, past the empty space where Zorn had been. It landed on the child. Something shifted in his face. Not much, just enough. He crossed the sidewalk and crouched in front of them, bringing himself to the girl's level. He spoke in Korean, low, careful words that Zara did not understand but recognized as gentle, the way you can recognize gentleness in any language. The girl did not respond. She did not look up. He reached out and placed one hand on her back. She pressed closer to Zara. A short silence followed, the kind as wait. The man straightened slowly and looked at Zara. Not the quick assessing glance he had given the rest of the scene. He actually looked at her, at the bruise forming along her ribs, the missing earring, the torn edge of her apron, the way her arms were still wrapped around his daughter like she had no intention of letting go until someone gave her a very good reason. Zara looked back. She was terrified. Her hands were shaking and her side was throbbing, and she had absolutely no idea what was happening. But she did not look away. Something registered in his expression. It was brief, and she almost missed it. He spoke. His English was clean and direct. "You will come with us." It was not a question. It was not an offer. Zara opened her mouth. "You were not asked," he said quietly. The compound was not what Zara expected. She had expected something cold, something that looked like danger. Instead, the building they brought her looked like a private members club. Dark stone exterior, heavy doors, no signage. Inside, the floors were polished concrete, and the lighting was low and expensive. It was the kind of place that had been designed to feel calm while everything inside it was anything but. They put her in a conference room. Long table, 8 chairs, a glass of water she had not asked for, but drank immediately because her throat was completely dry. Sora sat beside her, close enough that their arms touched. The girl had not spoken a single word since the sidewalk, but she had kept hold of Zara's hand through the entire drive, her small fingers locked tight, and she had not let go when they sat down either. Zara had not pulled away. The man who ran the debrief introduced himself only as Park. He was lean and precise, with the kind of stillness that made Zara think he had spent a long time learning to show nothing. He placed a small recording device on the table, opened a folder, and looked at her like she was a document he needed to read quickly. "Tell me everything you saw. Start from the moment you came through the door." Zara told him. She was surprised by how much she remembered. The height of the masked man, just under 6 feet, she estimated, based on how he lined up against the vehicle. The plates, partial but specific. The direction he moved when the SUVs arrived. The earpiece she had noticed him adjusting before he grabbed Sora. the small involuntary movement of someone receiving a live instruction. Park's pen slowed. Across the table, Jean, who had not spoken since the sidewalk, looked up from a folder in front of him. "You noticed the earpiece?" Park said. It was not quite a question. "I notice things," Zara said simply. "It's part of my job." Park made a note. Then he set his pen down and folded his hands, and the temperature in the room shifted slightly. "The man you saw, Zoran, he got away, and he saw your face clearly." Park paused, letting that settle. "That makes you a problem for whoever hired him. You cannot go back to your apartment. You cannot go back to the restaurant. We can arrange a secure location, monitored, controlled, until we determine the level of risk." Zara stared at him. "You mean you want to put me somewhere? For your safety, for your convenience," she said. The room was quiet for a moment. Jin's gaze moved from Zara to the small hand still holding hers beneath the table. He looked at it for a long moment. Then he leaned back in his chair and spoke 2 words. "She stays." Park turned to him. "Sir." "Here," Jean said. "She stays here." He did not look at Zara when he said it. He didn't need to. The estate was 40 minutes outside the city, past the point where the streetlights thinned out and the road narrowed between tall, dark trees. Zara watched Chicago disappear through the tinted window and said nothing, because there was nothing useful to say. The house, when it appeared, was large in a way that certain things are large, not showy, just permanent. Gray stone and clean lines, set back from a wide gravel drive. No fountains, no grand columns. Just a building that had clearly stood for a long time and intended to keep standing. The kind of place that did not need to announce itself. Inside was worse, in a way she hadn't expected. It was immaculate. Every surface was clean and bare. The floors were pale stone, the walls a cool off-white, the furniture dark and perfectly arranged. There were no photographs anywhere, no artwork that suggested anyone's personal taste, no color in the common rooms except the deep gray of the curtains and the black of Jin's security equipment, which was everywhere if you knew how to look for it. Small cameras at ceiling corners, a monitor built into the kitchen wall, a keypad beside every door. It was a fortress wearing the clothes of a home. The only sign that a child existed in this building was a pair of small pink shoes sitting neatly beside the front door. Zara noticed them immediately. She noticed, too, that they were the only thing in the entire entrance that was not perfectly in its place. They were slightly turned, the way shoes look when a child has stepped out of them quickly and moved on without thinking. She was shown to a suite on the second floor by a housekeeper named Mrs. Shin, a quiet woman in her 60s who communicated mostly through small, efficient gestures. The suite was larger than Zara's entire apartment in Chicago. A wardrobe had already been stocked with clothes in her size. She had not been asked for her size. She chose not to think too hard about that. Mrs. Shin handed her a folded card with the house rules printed on it. Meals were served in the dining room. Certain wings required clearance. Guests did not enter the east corridor without escort. Zara read the card. She folded it. She placed it on the bedside table. The next morning, she picked up Sora's breakfast tray from the kitchen before Mrs. Shin could carry it upstairs, walked to Sora's room, and sat down on the floor beside the small bed to eat with her. It was the rule about dining room meals, the first and smallest one on the list. They were halfway through breakfast, Sora quietly arranging pieces of fruit into a pattern on her plate. When the door opened, Jean stood in the frame. He looked at Zara on the floor. He looked at his daughter, who for the first time in recent memory was not eating alone. He said nothing. He pulled the door quietly shut and walked away. Sora's first word came on a Wednesday. Zara had been sitting on the floor of the girls' room, sorting through a box of craft supplies that Mrs. Shin had quietly produced after noticing Sora watching Zara's sketch menu layouts in a notepad one afternoon. They were cutting shapes from colored paper. No instruction, no goal, just scissors and color and the comfortable silence that had become their shared language. Sora held up a lopsided paper star. "Yellow," she said. Just that. One word, barely above a breath. But she was looking at Zara when she said it, and her eyes were waiting for something. "Yellow," Zara agreed, her voice perfectly steady despite the way her chest had just tightened. "That's a good one." Sora looked back down and cut another shape, Zara did not make a big deal of it. She understood, in the way she understood most things about children, that the moment you turn a small, brave thing into a celebration, the child becomes aware of it and grows careful again. So she kept cutting. She kept her face easy and open. And she waited. The sentences came slowly, the way plants grow, no visible movement day to day. And then one morning something new was simply there. A question about whether clouds had names. An observation that the stone floor was cold but the rug beside the window was warm. A very serious statement, delivered over breakfast one morning, that strawberries were better than blueberries and the matter was not up for discussion. It was a strawberry declaration that made Zara laugh. The sound left her before she could think about it. Full and bright, bouncing off the high marble walls of the hallway outside Sora's room. She heard it herself as if from a distance, surprised by it, and then surprised by the surprise. She could not remember the last time she had laughed like that, without calculating at first. She looked up and found Jean standing at the far end of the hallway. He was not looking at Sora. He was looking at Zara. His expression was unreadable, but he did not move away, and that felt like something. He had been doing that more, appearing at the edges of their mornings, staying a little longer each time before finding a reason to leave. That night, Zara couldn't sleep. She went to the kitchen at midnight and found Jean already there, standing at the counter with a glass of water, still fully dressed. He looked at her. She looked at him. Neither of them pretended this was unusual. She made tea. He stayed. She used to talk constantly. Jean said finally, his voice low. Her mother could never get her to be quiet. Zara wrapped both hands around her mug. My mother says the same thing about me. A pause settled between them. Not uncomfortable, just honest. It's hard, Zara said quietly, holding everyone together by herself. Jean looked at his glass. Yes, he said. It is. Neither of them said anything more. But when Zara went back to bed 20 minutes later, something in the house felt 1 degree warmer than before. Chapter 7. Someone on the inside. Zara heard it by accident. She had been coming down the back staircase, the narrow one near the east corridor that she had learned to use because it was quicker to Sora's room, when the voices stopped her. 2 men, speaking in Korean, standing just around the corner near the security office. She could not see them. She pressed herself against the wall and listened. Not because she had planned to, but because something in the tone made her body go still before her brain caught up. Her Korean was not good, but she had been living inside this house for weeks now, surrounded by the language every day, and the ear learns whether you ask it to or not. She caught fragments. A name she recognized, Zoran. A word that meant schedule. Another that meant inside or within. And one she had learned early because she had heard it spoken carefully around Sora. Betrayal. She went back upstairs the way she had come and sat on the edge of her bed for a long moment, turning the fragments over, fitting them against the things she already knew. Then she went and found Park. He listened to her with his usual stillness. Then he picked up his phone. The meeting happened that evening in Jin's study. Zara sat at the far end of the table, aware that she was the only person in the room who was not supposed to be there. Park laid out what the team had assembled over the past weeks. Maps, timelines, a pattern that had become impossible to ignore. Zoran had known Sora's exact route. He had known the gap in the security rotation, a 12-minute window that was not written down anywhere accessible to outsiders. He had known the timing of the driver's stop. None of that information lived outside the compound. None of it could have been bought from a rival. It had been given. Jean sat at the head of the table and said nothing for a long time after Park finished. The silence was different from his usual silence. His usual quiet was controlled. A closed door. This was the quiet of a man standing in a room where a door he trusted had just been found open, and all the cold air was rushing in. When he finally spoke, it was to Zara. You told Park about the earpiece on the night it happened, he said. Walk me through it again. Exactly. Zara kept her voice level. He adjusted it right before he grabbed her. Just a small touch, like he was making sure he could hear clearly. Someone was giving him a live instruction. He wasn't acting alone. He was being directed in real time. The room was quiet. Jean looked at Park. Something passed between them that Zara could not fully read, but the meaning was clear enough. Whoever had hired Zoran had been watching through him like a window, and that window opened from the inside. The gala was held in a private event space on the 42nd floor of a building that did not advertise its rental availability to the general public. Floor-to-ceiling windows looked out over the city lights. The room was filled with dark suits, expensive watches, and a particular kind of careful politeness that exists between people who do not fully trust each other, but need to be in the same room anyway. Zara walked in beside Jean and felt every eye in the place find her. She was wearing deep gold silk, a dress that Jin's stylist had chosen, and that Zara had almost refused on the grounds that it felt like too much. It was floor-length, simply cut, and it made her dark skin glow under the warm lighting like she had been carved from something valuable. Her natural hair was in a high, full puff that added 4 inches to her height and refused to be ignored. She looked like someone who had always belonged in rooms like this. She was also the most underestimated person in the building. Every person who glanced at her made the same quick calculation. Jin's guessed, likely decorative, probably not worth attention, and then moved on. She watched them do it, one after another, and felt the familiar settling feeling of being invisible inside a crowd. Good, she thought. Let them look away. She spent the first hour doing what she had always done. Not talking, not performing, watching. She noticed who greeted Jean first, and who waited to see how others reacted before approaching. She noticed the men who smiled too easily, and the ones who smiled too late. She noticed the servers in the corners, and the small clusters of conversation that broke apart too quickly when someone senior walked by. And she noticed Juan. He was one of Jin's inner circle. She had seen him at the compound twice. Always composed, always close to the center of things. He was standing near the bar, talking to a man she didn't recognize, and there was nothing wrong with the conversation, except for one thing. The moment a second man entered the room through the side door, a man Zara recognized from the photograph Park had shown her as one of Zoran's known contacts. Juan glanced at his phone. He didn't receive a message. He didn't send one. He just looked at it. A single quick check, like confirming a time, like confirming an arrival. Zara crossed the room to Jean slowly, without urgency. She stopped beside him and spoke very quietly, her eyes forward. Juan just clocked the man by the side door, the one from Park's photographs. He checked his phone the moment the man walked in. Jean did not look at her. He did not look at Juan. He lifted his glass and took a slow sip, and then said one quiet word to the man standing on his left. 12 minutes later, Juan was gone from the room. The conspiracy that had nearly cost Zara her life collapsed that night without a single raised voice. No one saw it happen. No one had been watching Zara. They got back to the compound just after midnight. The cars emptied quietly. Park disappeared into the security office with 2 of his men. The rest of the staff moved through the house in the efficient, soundless way they always did, resetting the building for the night. Jean checked on Zara first. She had stayed home with Mrs. Shin, and she was asleep, curled on her side with one hand tucked under her cheek and her pink blanket pulled up to her chin. He stood in her doorway for a long moment before pulling it almost closed, leaving it slightly ajar the way she preferred. Zara was sitting on the top step of the hallway, her gold dress exchanged for the plain clothes she had changed into when they arrived. Her shoes were beside her. She was looking at nothing in particular. The way people look when the adrenaline has finally finished draining out, and what remains is just the quiet truth of everything that happened. Jean sat down beside her on the step. Neither of them spoke for a while. The hallway was still except for the thin line of soft light falling from Zora's door across the floor in front of them. I wasn't there, Jean said finally, the night her mother died. Zara turned to look at him. He was looking straight ahead. I had been warned that something was coming. I made a choice about where to put my attention, and I put it in the wrong place. His voice was even, but it was the evenness of something that had been worked on for a long time. She was alone, and then she was gone, and Zara stopped speaking, and I told myself it was grief. He paused, but I knew it was also me. What I had done, what I hadn't done. The house was very quiet around them. I accepted it, he continued. 8 months of silence. I thought it was what I deserved. Zara was quiet for a moment. Then she said, you can deserve something and still not be stuck with it forever. Jean looked at her then. Really looked. the same way he had looked at her on the sidewalk that first evening. Like she was something he did not have an existing category for. "You walked into my house," he said, "and my daughter laughed." He said it simply, like a fact he'd been turning over for weeks and had finally decided to put down somewhere. "I didn't plan any of this," Zara said honestly. "I know," he said. "That's why it worked." The silence that followed was not empty. It was full of everything neither of them had said yet, and both of them already knew. "I'm not good at this," Jean said quietly. The confession landed without drama. Half statement, half warning, fully meant. "But I don't want you to leave." Zara looked at Sora's door, the light on the floor, the small, ordinary stillness of it. She had spent her whole life holding on. For her mother, for Amara, for strangers on sidewalks who needed someone to not let go. "Okay," she said softly. Just that, but she meant all of it. And neither of them moved from that step for a very long time.